Hello everyone, this is Gene and I'm back with another video. I hope you're all well. I apologize for the lighting. It's late at night here, and so the natural lighting is pretty much gone, so I'm not going to be as well lit as I would hope. But I hope that I'm still visible, so I hope you're all doing well this weekend. Hopefully next week will be good to us all, wherever we are, whatever we're doing. So I just want to do what I hope is a brief video, or at least brief for me, about an interesting, I guess, counterpoint that I keep seeing pop up. Now, of course, this is going to be related to Mortal Kombat, but it's not going to be about it. Like I said, I'm not really discussing it anymore. I've said what I have to say. Though that video is doing quite well, so thank you all. Whether you disagree or agree with me, whether you left a comment or not, whether you left a like or a dislike, thank you. Whatever you do, it is engagement. Engagement always helps the channel with the YouTube algorithms. So whether you like me or you hate me, or you're somewhere in between, thank you a lot. It helps. So, I guess you could say defense or counter that I've seen, in particular in Fourth Snake's videos, and a few in mine. Someone actually just left a comment saying that I didn't appreciate the storyline of Aftermath. I'm sorry, but the story didn't have much to appreciate outside of Shang, being sort of like the focus and the highlight character. Cary Tagawa did an amazing job. That doesn't mean it was a good story. There are so many plot holes that it might as well be Swiss cheese. I think actually Aftermath is the worst of the two between the 11 main story and Aftermath, and I think Aftermath just makes the main story worse when you put them together, because it just creates so many plot holes, because again, time travel. And of course we have, Dominic Gianciolo and whatnot, who don't really care about actually telling an interesting, cohesive story or about characterization. But what I wanted to do was address this particular criticism of people like myself and like Fourth Snake and others when we point out these inconsistencies, which is, well, who cares about the story? It's a fighting game, right? Who cares about the story? In fact, someone left a comment on his video saying that well, Ed Boon said that the games were always about the fighting and never about the story. So what does it matter? So here's my response to that. While yes, of course, in a fighting game, the fighting game mechanics and the engine, right, need to be the best that they can be, and to be enjoyable. Of course, it's a fighting game. It first and foremost needs to be a good fighting game. But here's the thing: part of being a good fighting game is also having a good story. We literally need a reason to fight. You can look at human history. There's always a narrative built around conflict, whether it's real world conflicts, right, wars and whatnot, or revolutions or social movements or everything. Both sides come up with a story. Both sides come up with a narrative that they tell themselves, that they tell the people that they want to win over, be it politicians, be it the public or whatever. Humans are natural storytellers, and when it comes to conflict, we quite literally need a reason for it. We need to create a story to justify it. Look at, for example, another one is sports. Sports by nature is competition. Competition creates conflict. And that conflict is what, at least part, will be part of what gets people to watch the sporting event, whether it's boxing, whether it's MMA, whether it's basketball, right? They always tell stories. If you've ever seen pre-fight interviews, right, they always hype up, if there is any bad blood or history between the fighters, they will hype that up to get people who maybe are a bit more casual interested, because a person may not be interested in the fight, but they may be interested in the story behind the fight, why these two people are fighting, or in the case of other sports, say basketball, football, soccer, or whatnot, why these two teams are playing, what is their history with each other, who has the winning record? Who has the losing record? Do the players on opposing sides have any personal beef with each other? Do players on the same team have personal beef with each other? Businesses and industries like ESPN and sports news in general would not exist without these real and manufactured stories to tell, because humans are by nature storytellers. We tell ourselves stories all the time. We make up myths and create stories, right, to explain things or to justify things, to give our lives meaning, to give our beliefs a narrative, right? We watch the news all the time. That's a story. And that's been going on since the beginning of human history. We are storytellers, and we will use every medium available to tell a story. So yes, while maybe not at the forefront always, because it's not, say, like an RPG, right, or especially a Japanese RPG where the story is tantamount, and everything is sort of in service of that. So I'll give you that, right? With say a JRPG, the story is the focus, and everything behind it, right? The art, the music, the gameplay, mechanics, and all that are in service of the story. Whereas with something a bit more competition based, like say a sports title, or in this case fighting games, the story is in service to the fight mechanic and the gameplay. But just because story is second, or story is in service to the gameplay elements and to the fight engine and all that, does not mean that story is not important. And I will prove to you that story is important. Every single major fighting game franchise that we all know, Street Fighter, Mortal Kombat, Tekken, King of Fighters, right, Soul Calibur, all these different fighting games, right, that became huge international hits, have deep lore, have deep individual character lore, and deep overarching plots and plot lore, right? You can go on any channel on YouTube that covers fighting games, and there'll be some mention of a character's backstory, right? There'll be mention of how a character's backstory informs their fighting moves, right, and whatnot. There is, of course, other things such as the story being told through how a character fights, what fighting style that they have, or their character design. I'll give an example. Ivy of Soul Calibur, right? She is a walking, talking narrative. Hers is a narrative of control, right? That's why she looks like and acts like a dom. She wants control over her life. She wants control over her destiny, right? And that is reflected in her design. That's called visual narrative, right? There's also, for example, one of her arms being like heavily armored, which makes it look a lot like Soul Calibur, which of course ties into her connection to Cervantes, being that Cervantes is her father, right? She is the daughter of the cursed pirate who wields the cursed sword. Then you have her other arm, which looks like it's covered in like lace and whatnot, and that represents her other father, right? The English nobility that she grew up in. And then of course it plays into the overall leather and lace motif. Then of course there's the color, right? She's associated with white and with purple. Purple in particular has long been associated with royalty. It's also been associated with alchemy or the dark arts, right? She's an alchemist. That's how the sword turns into a whip and all that. And she is of English nobility. There's a story being told in her appearance. There's a backstory that she's given to justify why she is hunting down certain characters. And this plays into the overall arc of the battle of good and evil between Soul Calibur and Soul Edge. You need a good story. You need a good story for a fighting game or for any game, really. You need a story that works for that genre, for that game. Yes. Is it ultimately an excuse plot? Yes, it is. Every plot in a video game, in any type of video game, is an excuse plot. Okay, one of my favorite video games is the first Metal Gear Solid game. Okay, the whole thing about Shadow Moses Island being taken over, it's an excuse plot to play as a super spy, to play as a super soldier. But you still need that to justify what's going on. You need that so that you can be entertained, so you can understand literally what the story is. Why is Snake here? Why does this conflict matter to him? Why is he allowing himself to be pulled out of retirement to deal with this? And the story provides that. It provides a variety of reasons, right? Liquid is his brother. Meryl, we find out later, is the daughter of Colonel Campbell, and Colonel Campbell is Snake's old CO. Right, Snake used to be a part of Foxhound, and then he left, and he's the cloned son of Big Boss, right? They find a way to justify it and tie everything back to Solid Snake in one way or another. But yes, it's an excuse plot, so that you can take a character who is a power fantasy, right, the world's best secret soldier, and go around and shoot virtual enemies, right, and take down bad guys and take down boss characters and all this stuff. And you know what? It's a damned good excuse plot. There's nothing wrong with having a plot in a game. You need a plot in a game. You need a plot, you need a reason for everything in life. Everything is a story. So if you're going to use that argument of, well, who cares about the story? Ask yourself the last time you played a fighting game that had a weak lore. I'm not saying it had a silly lore. All lores are silly. Soul Calibur's lore is silly. Street Fighter's lore is silly. Mortal Kombat's lore is silly. Tekken's lore is silly. All the lores are silly and outrageous and over the top in their own ways. But they're still deep lore. That's how they lasted over 20, now for many of them coming on to 30 years. In fact, Street Fighter is over 30 years at this point because it came out in the late 80s. A large part of that, whether you want to admit it or not, people who use this bad faith argument, is because of the fact that it has a deep lore. And people play the games to see the next chapter. As much as they do, they play the games wanting to unlock the endings and see what's next in this character's journey, as much as they want to knock out their opponent, right? Whether it's their family member, a bully, whoever it is, right? I remember when I was playing Street Fighter, yes, I played to win. I played to beat my brother, which I very rarely did because he learned the red fireball before I ever did. But yes, I was also interested in the endings. I was interested in seeing this character's story, whether it's Guile reuniting with his family after turning down the one chance he had to kill Bison, or whether it's Ryu winning and then wandering off again, whether it's Vega taking over Shadowloo and destroying the world, or whatever it is, right? Story matters. Story matters. Tell me the last time you played a fighting game that didn't have a deep lore and you enjoyed it. If fighting games, in particular, if fighting games that didn't have a deep lore could work, then why don't we see them? Plenty of fighting games came out back in the 1990s. Games like Tattoo Assassins. Where's that game now? Games like, as much as I liked it personally, Eternal Champions. Where is that game now? You don't see them. You know why? Because, in part, not a terribly strong lore. Although I will say I think Eternal Champions could work if you got it into a talented person, or rather a talented team's hands. I think it could work personally, but it's probably my own bias showing. But seriously, why don't we see games like, say, Thrill Kill? Not a deep plot. There's also, of course, other reasons why. There's other reasons why, of course, multiple reasons. But I think that the lore of these games is a large part. As the series goes on, the lore is going to grow. It happens for any story. Star Wars started out as one film, then it became a trilogy, then it became a prequel trilogy, now it's a sequel trilogy, and then there's the whole expanded universe, and then you have Clone Wars. It grew into this huge saga. That's the nature of storytelling. So, if you're going to use that bad faith argument, understand that part of the reason you're playing this game is because even you are interested in the character's story. And I think that for many people who use this argument, especially when it comes to Mortal Kombat and Sindel, it's because they either don't mind the change or are not personally invested in the character. So they don't mind if her history and characterization is wrecked. All I have to say is this. If it were Scorpion, if you're for this Sindel change, if they did to Scorpion what they did to Sindel, making him a cold-blooded killer, making him the gleeful murderer of his own family, who killed because he wanted power from Quan Chi, if everything you knew about him got upended, would you still be okay with this? Would you still agree? Would you still say, well, NetherRealm can do whatever they want? I doubt it. But anyway, that's the video. Please let me know what you think, and I will see you all in the next one. Bye.